Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. Today I am doing my first book review. I wanted to share with you guys everything that I read in the month of May and how I felt about the books, talk a little bit about them. I'm not really a very avid reader, but I'm really trying hard to become one, and I thought that it would be fun to incorporate what I read monthly. If you guys are interested in that and me continuing that, you'll have to let me know by giving this video a thumbs up and leaving me a comment below. But I am really excited about the books that I did read in May, so much so that I really wanted to share it with you guys. So let's get started with the first book that I read, which is my favorite, and I don't know if I'll ever find a book that I like more than this one, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is a copy that I have of it from college, and this is a newer copy that I just recently purchased, which is so beautiful. And what I love about it is there is, first of all, some beautiful illustrations inside, but also they have a character map in here, and it is like really nice to have a list of all of the characters and their descriptions, and kind of they also have a Bronte timeline in here, which I found really interesting, just learning about the Bronte sisters. There is a map of all of the areas that have been discussed in the book. It's just, I love it. If you can find a book that has that, it would be really helpful, because there were a lot of characters to follow along with and a lot of moving around and things like that. So Charlotte Bronte wrote this book in 1847. She was only 31 years old, and she died at 39. And I don't know why, but that really bothered me. As I'm reading this, I was thinking, I have already outlived her, and what a masterpiece this is, and how smart she was. And this was well over 100 years ago, and to just think that so many scenes in this book and emotions and things that she talks about and things that she has felt, I really resonated with. So I thought that this book really it just touched me. I really connected with the characters, especially Jane, who is the main character, and it's just a great story. So since I've never done this before, I'm going to try to tell you enough about it without spoiling it for you. I don't want to ruin the end or the real highlights of the story that take you by surprise. So I'm gonna try to be as vague as I can. I'm going to share with you some of my favorite quotes from the book, and we'll see how it goes. Let me know how I do, okay? Okay, so Jane was an orphan child. Both of her parents died when she was young, and her uncle adopted her and took her into his family as his own. But shortly thereafter, he passes away, leaving her with the aunt, who really wanted nothing to do with the whole situation to begin with, wanted nothing to do with Jane, kind of like the Harry Potter situation, right? So she's now with this family that doesn't want her at all, and her three cousins that live with her are very abusive and very mean to her, both physically and mentally abusive. So luckily, she eventually gets out of this house, and she is sent to an institution called Lowood Institution. And I just want to read you the quotes from this part of the book. So this is from when she was still living with her horrible aunt and cousins. And she says, "What a consternation of soul was mine that dreary afternoon. How all my brain was in tumult and all my heart in insurrection. Yet in what darkness, what dense ignorance was the mental battle fought? I could not answer the ceaseless inward question, why I thus suffered. Now, at the distance of, I will not say how many years, I see it clearly." So when she decides to move on, there is a family who is seeking a teacher to come in and teach a French girl that they are keeping in their home. And the man who owns the house, who is rarely ever there, but he does come on a visit, and his name is Mr. Rochester. And this was one of my favorite scenes, and something that Mr. Rochester shared with Jane. He says, "You never felt jealousy, did you, Miss Eyre? Of course not. I need not ask you, because you never felt love. You have both sentiments yet to experience. Your soul sleeps." I love that whole scene with her and Mr. Rochester, and how he so openly speaks with her despite seeming to be a very private person at times. So I really, really enjoy seeing how that all unfolds. And I hope that I haven't given anything away. I'm trying to be really vague in everything that I talk about, just trying to let you know a little bit about the characters. But I will give you one final quote. This is more towards the end of the book, and Jane finds herself in a position where she is trying to figure out what to do. She goes through some really bad hardships, and she says, "My spirit," I answered mentally, "is willing to do what is right, and my flesh, I hope, is strong enough to accomplish the will of heaven. When once that will is distinctly known to me, at any rate, it shall be strong enough to search, inquire, to grope an outlet from this cloud of doubt, and find the open day of certainty." So, such a wonderful book. I really highly recommend reading Jane Eyre. Charlotte Bronte really makes these characters come to life. She really brings you into the story. I had a really hard time closing this book. I wanted to read it from beginning to end. I was always worried about the characters, wondering what was going to happen next. I really felt involved, and I was sad for it to end. It was one of those books that, like, I felt so much a part of their lives that I didn't want to let them go. So that was really a great read. After that, I thought it would be appropriate to read a book that you may have heard of called Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So I tried to read this book last summer, and I just wasn't in the right state of mind. I found it really hard to read, and I put it away, never came back to it. But after reading Jane Eyre and really liking the style of Charlotte Bronte's writing, I thought that I was ready for some Jane Austen readings. So I very much enjoyed this story as well. It was a little harder for me to get through it. It was the type of book that you really have to pay attention to every word. There is so much going on all of the time. There are so many characters and locations and homes where people live, and so much traveling going on. I'll show you. I actually had to keep, I have this, it's like a reading journal. It's a leather book, and I just take notes, and don't judge my notes because I don't care about my penmanship or my spelling or anything. I just jot things down, and I was trying to keep a whole list of characters here and trying to coordinate like who belongs to which family and where they live, and there were just so many characters. At one point I just stopped writing them down, so that really got confusing. I wish that I had the book that had the character map and pieced everyone together, as well as a map of all the locations like I had with the Jane Eyre book, because it would have been really, really helpful for Pride and Prejudice. But in Pride and Prejudice, let me just read the first line to you because it pretty much sums up the premise of the entire book, and I just think it's really funny. And I think a lot of Jane Austen's writings, like, you have to kind of read into what she's saying because she's being so sarcastic, and you're supposed to laugh at a lot of the things that she's saying, and this was one of them. This is the very first line of the book. "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." I don't know why I found that to be so funny. And there are just some lines in here that I was just like, wow, you're hysterical. I had a hard time following some of it because there was just so much going on, and you had to know, you know, who was doing what, and you had to be familiar with the characters. So I do understand when people say when you read a Jane Austen book, you should read it multiple times because you take away something different and something more each time. I can totally get that because I feel like if I read this again, I will learn so much more about the characters. There are just so many details in her books. I found myself oftentimes reading a page and going back and reading it again to make sure that I was having a good understanding of exactly what was going on in that moment. But it was also a great read, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. I'll try without, I have to go to my notes here, but without giving too much away. So the Bennett family is consisted of 5 sisters, and the mom is looking to marry them all off to wealthy husbands because they are not in a financially great state, and the father doesn't have much to offer. So she really wants to see her girls wed off to wealthy men. So that's like the whole premise of the story. And followed by that are a lot of balls and dinners and traveling and just a lot of fun things to be a part of. So a wealthy man moves to town. His name is Mr. Bingley, and he brings his friend, Mr. Darcy, along with him. And of course, the mom is really excited to have her girls meet Mr. Bingley because he has money and he needs to marry one of her girls. And I'll read you a quote from the beginning of the book. "A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony. In a moment, I knew you would be wishing me joy." And this is true. I found in this book how different marriage was back then. It felt like more of a business agreement than a romance, and you can tell that the women are still looking for the romance part of it. Elizabeth, who is the main character, you're kind of getting her perspective. She is very headstrong, like she knows what she wants, and she did make me laugh a few times. She is not going to settle. So I really like that about her, despite her mom's encouragement in wanting the girls to marry off. Elizabeth is not going to bend. She's gonna do what she wants to do, and I love that about her. One of the things that I really appreciated about this book was the lifestyle of the families. I love how the families are, first of all, so close. Like the sisters are very close to each other. They spend a lot of time together, and I love that. Even the parents seem to be very close with their children as well. I love that we get to go to all of these different balls and parties and formal dinners that they have. It's interesting to see how they spend their leisurely time reading books. Libraries were a really big deal, and there were several references made to having a beautiful and big library that offered plenty of wonderful books to read, because that was something that was important back then. It was a way that they entertained themselves. It was a way of passing time, and it's something that was very important. They were really big on reading and playing cards, so I thought that was interesting, seeing like what they did after dinner, getting together as a family in one room, and one person would be reading and 2 people would be playing cards, and then there was always somebody at a piano playing and someone singing, and it just seemed like a lot of fun, like a really nice way to spend an evening, and also a nice way to get to know each other and to have closer relationships with the people in your life and the people that you love. I feel like nowadays it's just so different, and there's not a lot of that conversation going on, and just kind of face-to-face interaction. So I thought that was a wonderful part of the story that I enjoyed seeing. So I really thought this quote was very relevant. "To be fond of dancing was a certain step to falling in love." And then in this scene, Mr. Darcy is speaking with Mrs. Bentley about how like the city is more interesting than the country in a way, because there's so much more going on and so much to talk about and so many different people. So Mr. Darcy says, "The country," said Darcy, "can in general supply but a few subjects for such a study. In a country neighborhood you move in a very confined and unvarying society. But people themselves alter so much that there is something new to be observed in them forever." And that is so true. I really liked that. That totally connected with me. It's nice to see how characters change and how sometimes what you see is not what you get in this book. So this video is going to be really long. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not destroying it for you guys. So that is my opinion and review of Pride and Prejudice. Also, I have to say, Jane Austen was another author who really kind of resonated with me because she wrote this book, I think she was in her early 40s, and she also died at a young age. So Jane was only 38 years old when she wrote this book, and she died at 42 years old. And I thought that was incredibly sad because she had just published such an amazing book and she was so young. And I just think that it's, I don't know, because they're kind of like in my age group. I think that's why Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen kind of felt like friends to me, and just thinking to myself that they wrote these amazing stories kind of like at my age was amazing, but it was also so sad that they died shortly thereafter. So anyway, two wonderful books, and I have another one to share. Actually, I have two more to share. If you're curious to listen, I did listen to an Audible. It was Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, and after reading Pride and Prejudice and Jane Eyre, I did not like this at all. It was just so raw and disturbing and vulgar. It's just not what I care for. It's about a woman who is a reporter for a magazine, and her boss tells her to go back to her hometown because there are murders going on there, and they want her to investigate further because she like lived there and grew up there, so she probably would be able to have a better kind of take on what's going on. The murders are happening to 8 and 10-year-old girls. Like, my daughter is 8 years old, and they are horrible. Like, the things that happen to these girls are really bad. So that did not sit well with me at all. Obviously, being a mom and having a young child, like, I don't want to hear or think about these things. And it just talks about just the girl herself, who is the reporter, has some underlying psychological issues. There's some stuff going on with her mom and her stepsister, and everything and everyone in this story is disturbing. And I did not care for it. It was a murder mystery. I think that it was very predictable. The person that I thought did it from the very beginning was the one that did it. So I don't know if like you're going to be shocked at the end, or if I'm just a brilliant murder mystery detective and I had it all figured out, but that's highly unlikely. And the reason I even listened to this was because I really did like Gone Girl, which was another book written by Gillian Flynn. That one wasn't nearly as vulgar or disgusting as this one was. So take that for what it is. I know that there is an HBO series on this with Amy Adams, who I love, but I love her as Giselle in Enchanted, which is a Disney movie, if you're not familiar with that. And that is how I see her. So I can definitely not watch her in this HBO series because it will ruin her for me forever. And after listening to that audiobook, let me show you my last book of the month. So if you guys watched my last video where I shared with you already what I'm going to be reading in the month of June, as well as a giveaway, so if you haven't watched it yet, go ahead and make sure you check it out. But I read in May with my daughter Madison, The House at Pooh Corner, written by A.A. Milne. Winnie the Pooh just cracks me up, and I really needed to read this after listening to Sharper Things, or Sharper Objects, or whatever that horrible thing was. So this was really such a happy book, and I just want to start off with the first chapter. And Pooh is just like in his own world, and he's so silly and funny and clueless, but yet so smart, and some of the things that he says is so wonderful. And Winnie the Pooh does hold some of my favorite quotes of all time. But he is walking to Piglet's house, so he's making up a little song in his head. And it's funny because me and Madison had the song in our head all week after reading it. So he says, "The more it snows, tiddly-pom, the more it goes, tiddly-pom, the more it goes, tiddly-pom. On snowing, and nobody knows, tiddly-pom. How cold my toes, tiddly-pom. How cold my toes, tiddly-pom, are growing." And it's these little like songs that Pooh makes up just as he's going about his everyday occurrences, and it's just such a simple and fun-loving story. I think this is the second book, so I do want to get the first one and read that with Madison as well because we enjoyed this one so much. We're going to be reading Anne of Green Gables for the month of June by L.M. Montgomery, so we're excited to start reading that. I'm going to read you one more quote that I enjoyed. And I like how every chapter chapter starts off with in which. So this chapter is in which Rabbit has a busy day, and we learn what Christopher Robin does in the mornings. And it starts off, it was going to be one of Rabbit's busy days. As soon as he woke up, he felt important, as if everything depended upon him. It was just the day for organizing something, or for writing a notice signed Rabbit, or for seeing what everybody else thought about it. It was a perfect morning for hurrying around. And like, isn't that your everyday? Like, don't you feel like that every morning as an adult? And that's why I just really liked that whole beginning line to this particular chapter, because you do have that feeling like you wake up and you're like, okay, I have stuff today and I have all of these things to do and to organize and to think about and people to see. And it's just so fun to have that come to life at 100 Acre Woods by Rabbit, one of my favorite characters in Pooh. So that is my May reading wrap up. How'd you guys like my first bookish video? I hope that you enjoyed it, and make sure that you go ahead and check out my last video if you want to be a part of the giveaway that I have going on right now. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe, and hit the thumbs up button if you liked this video. And I'm losing my voice, so I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.